Not only is it All-Star Weekend, it's draft weekend for MLB, and the Cubs made 2 picks on day one. They took a pair of pitchers. They took right-handed pitcher out of Oklahoma, Cade Horton, with the number 7 pick to start things off in round 1. And then round 2, they took IMG Academy, that is high school, left-handed pitcher Jackson Ferris with the 47th pick. They got 2 top 25 big board guys, according to MLB.com, Horton number 24 and Ferris number 19 with their first 2 picks. And that's a good place to start. We'll talk a little bit about today's draft picks, rounds 3 through 10 as well. But boys, I want to hear from each of you. Juice, I know you've got something epic to say. So I'm going to let Joey go first and get his points in really quick before you just hit us with our YouTube clip worthy just juicism, that I'm going to call it, about these first 2 draft picks. So Joey, the floor is yours. Jackson Ferris, Cade Horton, what do you think?
Yeah, first, I was surprised that they did go pitcher with the first pick that they had in the draft, just because there were so many good bats available. I felt like at that spot, and just a lot of guys were projecting a bat to go in their spot, like when they did their mock drafts, which they never mean anything, right? The mock drafts really never mean anything. There are some years where you can kind of nail down those 1 through 3 guys in the drafts, and I think they do a pretty good job of nailing those guys down most years, the 1 through 3 picks in the draft. But once it gets to like pick number 7, you really have no idea what direction a team's going to go or who's going to be available to you on the board. I felt like there were some surprising picks in this draft before the Cubs got to their selection, like Kumar Rocker. And I think Juice actually tweeted that out too. So I was thinking, wow, this is a good shot for a solid bat to fall, right? But once they got to that point in the draft and they took Cade Horton out of Oklahoma, now Alex, I used to write for PrimetimeSportsTalk.com a little bit as well. And Alex, an author for them, is a buddy of mine. He did a great draft profile on Horton, and he comped him to Dylan Cease. And he said that his fastball slider combo was just so similar to Dylan Cease. And since I read that article, I couldn't unsee it. And like, you look at his regular season ERA and it wasn't that great. And then you look at his, what he did in the College World Series, the 5 starts in the College World Series, 2.61 ERA, a ton of strikeouts and minimal innings pitched, and not too many innings pitched, but he did provide length. He started to really put it together after the Tommy John. Like, maybe this was just a guy that's slow to ramp up. And usually after you come off of Tommy John, you do struggle with command. So I like the potential that I see from this kid. And I didn't know a ton about him coming into this. But, reading up on him and like talking to guys like Alex, I like what I see. And then you got in the second pick with Jackson Ferris, they're just adding a ton of Jacksons here. Now we got Jackson Clint Frazier, we got Jackson Ferris, Jackson Holiday was drafted in this draft. Like, I think he's intriguing too. Out of IMG Academy, he's like Drew Gray was out of IMG Academy. Drew Gray, I really want to see him pitch too. Another lefty who had Tommy John, and I don't know. We'll see how it works out with him, but he was a guy that a lot of people thought should have went in the first round. And I'll kind of let Juice give his thoughts here because I'm wondering if we're thinking the same thing about philosophies, but I don't want to speak too soon. So I'll let Juice kind of give his thoughts.
I was really hoping you would just take my thunder there, to be honest with you. No, but I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Joey. When I sat and watched the draft last night, I watched with the idea that, yeah, they would be picking a position player. But then when they picked a pitcher and a college pitcher, I immediately thought, well, why? Why did they do that? And I sat on it and I thought about it. I'm like, all right, I'm going to wait till the second round. So I waited till the second round, and they picked a high leverage high school arm out of IMG Academy. And I said, this sounds just so familiar from my, recent rabbit hole experiences driving down when Dan Kantrovich was hired. Do you know that Dan Kantrovich has done this twice? He's drafted the number 1 or a top pitching prospect out of college twice. And you know the 2 names that they were? Michael Wacha and Jack Flaherty. Those are 2 great names to start just an idea of a comp of what he's looking at. So then I started thinking, what's the plan for building position players? We mentioned on this show plenty of times that the Cubs have 2, maybe 3 very needed positions that they're probably going to trade at this deadline. Catcher and possibly Ian Happ and some arms in the bullpen as well. I think in this case, after what we saw, they're probably going to be asking for position players. That's another almost draft that you're getting back. It's almost like double dipping in rounds 2 and 3. Those are the prospects you're probably going to end up asking for. So 2 and 3 are probably guys who have been in the system for a little bit. They're at single A, high A, maybe a few of them are at double A. And you're adding to this group of prospects that are going to compete with the same ones that you've already drafted. So they have this just huge amount of, and South Bend's going to be really fun to come and watch. And I'm so glad that I'm going to be just 2 seconds walks in about 2 weeks from that place, because if this is what they're going to do, the Cubs are just going to be bad this year, and it's clear that they're going to draft very high again. It is a lottery-style draft next year. It's the first year that happens. The worst record may not get the number 1 pick, but the Cubs may get lucky. If they end up in the top 4, it improves their chances. My question is all right, at that point, let's look at the 2023 draft board. The first 5 are all high potential position players, and they range from shortstop to center field, outfield to infield help. There's a lot of great names. And I think if you see that and you've linked all the trade or the free agent rumors for this offseason that they're going to spend money, it seems as if they're going to err on the side of having deep starting pitching names. And then they're going to sign or trade for, with their assets they have this year for position players, restock that system to get it within the top 5, and then use all of their assets to buy players that they think that they can compete with in the short term. Because they still have guys like Stroman. They still have guys like Kyle Hendricks. They still have, some names like Nico Horner and Christopher Morel and Brendan Davis, who may come up next year and compete. So I think that while we talked about this being just a 2 to 3 year long rebuild, the Cubs may spend smart money in this offseason, add a few on shorter deals if they can, a la Marcus Stroman, and then you have an embarrassment of riches coming down the line in starting pitching, in position players, in arms for the bullpen. I mean, a lot of these guys we're talking about as starters right now may project as relievers strictly because the guys they drafted in this draft may work out, and those are your top 2, 3 in your rotation, opposed to, maybe a Jordan Wicks is now your 4, but he's a really good 4. So that's where I'm kind of thinking that this whole plan kind of starts to unveil. And in that same draft that they drafted Michael Wacha, there was 4 other names that ended up going in that draft. All 4 of them ended up at the big league level, contributing for the Cardinals. And my philosophy on all of this is if you dove in, and I haven't dove in on the Carter Hawkins side of it, that's my tonight's assignment. I want to see his idea of pitching and what it relates to, because those 2 definitely sat in these meetings and said, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, because nobody had the Cubs board this way. So they see something. And if you want to hang your hat on anything, you hang it on the fact that Kantrovitz, Jack Flaherty, and Michael Wacha, it's the same scenario. It's repeated itself. History's repeated itself. And that's why I'm so high on this Horton pick, because if he sees it, it's got to be true, because this is what he's good at. You can't doubt the man can see talent. And while a lot of people are looking at a fact that maybe they reached, if they reach and he's Jack Flaherty, who gives a shit? At that point, you have yourself a perennial ace who is an all-star, and none of this matters.
Yep, and he already had the arm problems too. Like Sorry, Ron. The getting the Tommy John out of the way, to me, that's actually a positive. I think people are looking at it as a negative. I think it's a positive because, like, look how many guys have Tommy John now. He got his Tommy John out of the way early. Yeah, it could always come back. He could always need it again. But do you get it done now? Now, how many innings does he have on basically a new elbow? Like, you know.
Right. And that's the only guy that I'm mad that the Cubs did not draft. And it would have meant that there's no Horton. And after I went down this rabbit hole, I thought about it, would be Collier. That was because he's the only one who forwent to go play in a league where he could have the wood bat and play with upper like talent to where he was older than him and where he was kind of given the opportunity to play against older talent. And I think that was the only guy on the board that was right there. I was like, man, like I really wanted him. But I think the way it worked out is they thought that maybe Tamar would fall. And when he didn't, this was the plan that they had set in a lot of ways. If one of those top two guys were going to be there, yeah, they would have did that. But I think that when the board fell as it fell, they were like, all right, well, this is what we have to do. We got to stock, the pitchers down in the farm and bring in some guys who throw hard because we've been complaining for how long? We just don't have guys who throw hard. Well, they drafted a lot of guys who throw mid-90s, and that's cool, and that's tough. And the guy that they drafted at 7 throws 97 and has a 90-mile-an-hour slider. Everything's going to be okay, Cubs fans. Just take a breath.